Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley, and as always, I want to start by thanking you and welcoming you. I'm so glad you're here, and I do not take your listenership lightly. It means a lot to me for all the spaces and places you could be that you chose to be here. Now, if you have not been listening to the podcast recently, where the heck have you been? No, I'm kidding. But I do want to let you know that we're embarking on an entire series about the basics of fat loss. And this series began several episodes ago. So if you want to start from the beginning, I highly recommend that you go back to episode 219. And you can actually even go a little further back than that if you wanted to episode 217. Because in episode 217, which was titled Real Talk About Weight Loss, I talked about why I actually don't teach weight loss. I don't preach weight loss. I don't sell weight loss. I don't actually use the words weight loss because weight loss and fat loss are not the same thing. And in that episode, I make it very clear on the difference and why I actually am really careful about using fat loss and not weight loss when I'm talking about reducing fat on the human body. In episode 219, I cleared up some misunderstandings around fat loss so we could kind of lay a strong foundation for having this conversation. And then in our last episode, episode 220, I really helped you to better understand the importance of a solid foundation, taking the time to heal and fortify your body before you add stressors like calorie cutting and aggressive exercise, if you ever need to add those things at all. And I introduced what I call the Fat Loss Trifecta. So this is the way that I go about helping my clients with fat loss. And please hear that not all of my clients want to work on fat loss, but some of them do. And so in our work together, we always start from the space of mental health. I want to ensure that my clients are pursuing fat loss for the right reasons, and that it feels like the right time and place in their life to be embarking on that. Second to that, we work on hormonal health because hormones are the government of your body. And if your hormones are really wonky and not working properly, it can make fat loss really difficult. And the name of the game when it comes to hormonal balance is managing your total stress load. And I went into a deep dive in all the ways that stress chemically disrupts your body and makes fat loss very difficult. So today, I want to continue the conversation and tap on this third piece of the trifecta, which is really the energy in, energy out equation. And I'm titling this episode, When Stress is a Good Thing, because we have this notion that stress is always bad, but stress is not always bad. It really depends on the timing and the dosage of the stress that you are applying. And with fat loss, we do have to apply stress on purpose at the right time. And something that I think is really important for you to understand at the outset of this conversation is you have what's called your allostatic load. And that's just a kind of fancy way of saying your total stress load. It's a combination of all the things in your life that act as stressors on your life. And your total stress load is made up of both good stressors, known as eustress, and bad stressors, which most of us know as distress. Now, when we talk about good stressors, the eustress, they tend to be short-lived, short-term stressors They tend to be motivating and exciting and something that improves performance, like learning new skills or developing yourself in a new way, taking on a new job, exercising, giving a speech. These are all things that can be really stressful mentally and physically to the human body, but it's how we grow. It's how we evolve. Eustress is really nourishing for our body. And again, I just want to emphasize that changes in nutrition and exercise absolutely can be good stressors when they are applied with the right dose at the right time. And this is where a lot of women are going wrong. They're applying really drastic changes to nutrition and exercise when their body is not in a position to be able to handle those stressors. So your total stress load is overflowing and your body starts to break down. Now, both eustress, the good stress, and distress require a lot of metabolic resources for us to manage them effectively. And when you're carrying a total stress load that is way too high for way too long, it can really trigger the body to down-regulate a lot of metabolic processes in an attempt to conserve energy and resources for you. So your body actually thinks it's doing a good thing for you, but you're pissed off because you're feeling like crap and your body is not responding the way you expect it to. So it ultimately makes you feel diseased in your body and like your body is revolting against you. So I covered all of that in really great detail in the last episode, 220. So make sure you check that out if you haven't listened to it yet. So the key to sustainable fat loss is paying very close attention to the total stress in your life to ensure that you are not exceeding your body or mind's capacity to manage stress at any given time. And once you have made an effort, a consistent effort to reduce unnecessary stress in your life, because let's face it, a lot of stress in your life is unnecessary because you're thinking about problems in your life in a way that cause more stress, because you're eating in a way that really unnecessarily disrupts the chemistry of your body, because you're not moving your body enough, right? So we actually create a lot of unnecessary stress in our lives by the way that we choose to live our lives. So once you have made a consistent effort to reduce those unnecessary stressors, and you've really given your body an opportunity to heal and recover and fortify, you are in such a better position to add strategic, short-term stress to accelerate your body's fat burning response. And again, I just want to emphasize, I know I sound like a broken record, but you are not in a position to add more stress until your head's in a good place. So you have built some skill sets to manage your mental stress, and you have spent time deloading your life of unnecessary stressors. And you have been consistent with the basics, the basic lifestyle habits that will help to heal and fortify your body. And if, again, you don't know what those basics are, go to graceandgrit.com/5 to thrive and register for my free 5-part video series, which goes into great depth in all of those elements. So there are two things, there's lots of things, but two things that we primarily use to help accelerate the fat loss process once you have deloaded your life from those unnecessary stressors. So when you have unloaded your life from unnecessary stressors, your intestinal health should be better. Your organ function should be up and running properly. Your cellular health is in a much better position to do all the jobs it has to do. And so many people will start experiencing fat loss in just the phase of healing and fortifying. They truly will. They're not messing with calories. They're not adding any kind of aggressive exercise. But just by being kinder to their body and giving it what it needs and deserves, their body will start functioning better. But there may come a point, depending on your goal, where you hit a plateau, even though you're taking consistent action to manage your total stress load. And again, if you've been consistent with the basics, your hormonal system is functioning well, you are primed to experiment with adding some stress on purpose, which has the potential to accelerate the fat burning process. What are those stressors on purpose? Nutrition, right? There's ways we can tweak nutrition to elicit and accelerate a fat burning response, and exercise. So the diet industry crams this down your throat, right? We always hear this energy in, energy out equation. You just need to eat less than you utilize. Well, I hope you understand by now it's not as simple as that. Because if your mental health is in the gutter and your hormonal system is jacked, your organs aren't functioning properly, your intestinal health is way off kilter, I don't care about the energy in, energy out equation. Your body is going to have a really hard time processing that message in the way that you expect it to. So we can add, when the time is right, we can play with calorie load depending on your goals. And in this conversation, the goal is fat loss. So when we're talking about fat loss and calorie load, typically after the healing and fortifying process, which by the way may actually require more calories, when you're intentionally adding more stressors to break a plateau, calorie reduction may be a conversation worth having. May be, I want to emphasize, because so many people are so quick to jump there, but it's not right for everyone. And another thing we can do intentionally with nutrition is we can play with macronutrients. So macronutrients are things like fat, protein, and carbohydrates, right? They're the really large nutrients that make up the bulk of your diet. And we can play with the amounts of those that you're consuming to see how your body responds differently to different percentages of those foods. Now, a long time ago, I think it was almost like a year and a half ago, I interviewed Dr. Jade Teta, who does a lot of work with women specifically on metabolic health. And he said something in the interview that I just loved. He said, things like dialing in macronutrients and taking a look at calories, so like calculating calories, understanding the amount of energy that you are eating, is all a way to refine, not define your approach. So we use these strategies, again, temporarily. Like calorie cutting is not a space to live in forevermore because it's hard. Right? There's hunger. Depending on your goals may change. You may want to build some muscle mass at some point, which again requires a surplus, not a deficit. But we use these strategies at the right time and the right place to refine our process, not define it. Just because something works for you for a while doesn't mean it's going to work forevermore, because health is a forever evolving thing, depending on your age and stage of life and what else is going on in your life. And exercise can be a great stressor, right? It can be a good type of stress when we are very strategic about adding in strength and cardio progressions. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of women do not understand the concept and the value of progression in exercise. I mean, they may theoretically understand it, But in application, it's not at all what they're doing. What a lot of women are doing is they're just going balls to the walls, all out, 100% when they haven't been doing anything. And then they wonder why their system is getting overly stressed, they're feeling exhausted, and they aren't getting the results they want. It's really no mystery. So piggybacking the conversation that we had in episode 220 about how stress influences chemistry, both nutrition and exercise have the capacity to help you do things like stabilize blood sugar and improve cellular insulin sensitivity, which is a really big deal when it comes to shedding unwanted fat. So again, if that is like a totally new concept to you, go back and listen to episode 220. Now, let's talk a little bit about how to actually tweak these things specifically, nutrition and exercise, when you are in a plateau and you have been consistent with the other things that we've already talked about. And you know that your body and mind are in a position to be able to handle more stress. So when it comes to nutrition, I find a lot of women, they'll often work with me and say, I'm eating so well and nothing is changing. And so often I will just say to them, okay, show me. Like, record your food and let's actually look at the data of what you are doing. Because truth be told, humans suck at recollecting what they actually did. And 9 times out of 10, when a woman starts journaling her food and being really honest with herself about what she's doing, looking at the data, the story is usually a different one than what she's been telling herself. So often she will be dramatically under eating what she thought she was eating, or she might be dramatically overeating what she thought she was eating. And when we look at things like macronutrients, it usually tells a very different story than the one that she was telling herself, right? So there is very often a lot more carbohydrate than she was aware of. And please don't hear me saying carbohydrates aren't awesome. They are. They're just to be respected. So when it comes to journaling food, there's a lot of levels of discipline around journaling. And what I mean by that is you don't need to go to the most extreme version of journaling food when you're trying to get out of a plateau. If you haven't been journaling food at all, just writing down what you've been doing can be really informative. Because again, it allows you to focus on the data and not the drama. The drama is the story you're telling yourself without the data. Look at the data and get very honest with yourself about what might need to be tweaked. Do you need to eat a little bit more? Do you need to eat a little bit less? Do you need to change, again, what the food is actually made up of? And here's the real truth about all of this. It's all an experiment. So I'm not going to tell you with 100% certainty if you make a certain change that you are going to get the results you are seeking. But here's what I do know. When you make a change and you still are in a plateau, nothing's changing, then you go back to the drawing board and you try something else. So data can hugely help you to create a pathway to fat loss. Now, once you've been recording food and you kind of see, maybe you make some assumptions about where tweaks can be made, the next level of discipline, should you need it, and you may not, would be getting harder data. Meaning you're not just writing your food down in a notebook, but you're actually putting your food, you're logging it into a database that can give you some information about the amount of energy that you're consuming and what that food is actually made up of. Because I will tell you, in all the years I've worked with women, a lot of women think that they know what a protein is and what a carb is and what a fat is. But these foods are often not separate things. So I could eat a food like, let's just say, an almond that has fat, and it also has a little bit of protein. right? I could drink something like almond milk, which is going to have some carbohydrate and some fat and maybe a tiny bit of protein. And most people off the top of their head have no idea what those percentages end up being at the end of the day. How much protein did you really eat today? I can't even at this stage, 20 years in the industry, I can't tell you with any degree of close accuracy what my food was made up of today. I genuinely know foods that have higher protein, higher carbs, higher fats, things of that nature. But if I'm really trying to dial in and get more specific about what I'm doing so I can problem solve, I need help to do that. So databases can be really instrumental in that. Now, it's worth saying here that if you use any kind of database, I want you to know that calorie counting is not a perfect science. It's just not, for so many reasons. However, it is close enough to help you understand your food. And that, to me, is the value of food journaling in something like a database. And when I say database, things like MyFitnessPal come to mind. Like, that's a really commonly known database. I know Lose It is one that a lot of people have used. Chronometer is one that a lot of people use. There's a lot of databases online that you can plug your food into to get this kind of information. But if nothing else, it is such an education about food and an education that can serve people really well. Now, do I think that journaling your food in a database is a way to live the rest of your life? No. But it's kind of like when I first had a bank account, I literally balanced my checkbook to the penny all the time. And it really taught me a lot about how to manage my finances. And now I can go into my online banking and I'm not as meticulous as counting down to the penny, but I better understand how my money is coming and going and how to manage it. And that's what something like a database can do in terms of calories, right? In terms of the energy in terms of what that energy is made up of. So you can make more informed decisions about what you might want to experiment with next. So when it comes to the amount of energy you're consuming, one of the things I often recommend to women is just log your food for 7 to 10 days and take an average of how much food you're eating per day. So that literally looks like entering food into a database for 7 to 10 days and dividing it by that total number by 7 to 10, right? Depending on how many days you recorded. And you get your average. And then the next place I encourage people to go is just be consistent with that number for the next 7 to 10 days, and let's see what your body does. Because ladies, you know how we are with food. We are wildly all over the place, right? One day we hardly eat anything. The next day we eat a ton, right? We might do really well during the week and then overindulge on the weekends. And if you are in a position, not everybody is, but if you are in a position where you want to make a change to your body composition, just being consistent with what you're feeding your body in terms of total load and what that load is made up of can teach you a lot about how your body is responding to that messaging. And when you better understand how your body is responding, you can tweak it. So let's just say that you've been really consistent for 7 to 10 days with your average calorie load, and you're not really feeling better, and your weight's not dropping. What you may want to do at that point is reduce your calories. Now, when I say reduce, I'm not talking about thousands of calories at a time, right? Most women aren't even eating enough to do something like that. But I do see women going very drastic when they're trying to reduce calories from their diet. Try reducing by 250 calories, just 250. And what specifically should that be coming from? Well, two places are to me are more helpful. Number one, usually the most helpful place is reducing your total carb intake. And why? Because your body loves using carbohydrate for fuel. It's really easy for your body to use. But when we're talking about fat loss, we don't want the body using carbohydrate for fuel. We want the body to use stored fat for fuel. So if I reduce for a time, this is not a permanent way of life, but if I reduce for a time the carbohydrates that I'm consuming in my diet, I'm not saying eliminate, but we're reducing by 250 calories, maybe a serving, right? Maybe 25 to 50 grams of carbs. I reduce, and I stay consistent with that to see how my body responds. The second place I could reduce calories, which again, it really depends where you're starting, is fat. I see a lot of fat is very good. Fat is a wonderful thing for the human body, right? Consuming fat does not, I should say, it doesn't necessarily turn into fat in the human body. But what a lot of people fail to recognize is fat is very calorie rich, meaning there's almost twice as much energy in fat as there is in protein or carbohydrates. So if you're somebody who notices when you start journaling food that your fat is at like 50 or 60% of your total daily intake, you could probably afford to reduce your fat slightly and see if that doesn't make a difference. But if your fat is already at like 25, I would say all the way up to 35%, I would mess with carbohydrates first. But you aren't going to know that information unless you journal your food, unless you record your food in some way. So with nutrition, when we talk about fat loss, we're also talking about metabolic flexibility. So your body has the capacity to use carbs, protein, or fat for fuel. And because we live in such a carb-rich culture, most people's bodies are just kind of humming along using carbohydrate for fuel. Now that's awesome if you don't have excess fat to lose, right? I almost said weight. Oh, the horror. But if you don't have excess fat to lose, you're not in a state of trying to lose fat, and you feel hormonally balanced, and your body is working properly, fine, right? Keep the same amount of carbs in your diet. But if you're feeling off kilter, and again, I talked a lot about this in last week's episode, in episode 220, it's worth promoting that metabolic flexibility, meaning we never really want the body to use protein for fuel. Why? Because if our body's using protein for fuel, that means it's literally using muscle mass to fuel itself. And this is what happens sometimes with extreme diets, right? We aren't eating enough, and the body will actually get rid of muscle tissue because muscle tissue is expensive for the body to keep. So we don't want the body using that protein for fuel. We do want the body to use stored fat for fuel. So when we reduce the carbohydrate intake in our diet reasonably and consistently over time, we will encourage the body to use stored fat for fuel instead of blood sugar, right? Instead of constant carbohydrates from the diet. Now, there's a lot of other ways, like extreme measures, that will help promote that metabolic flexibility. So you've heard maybe of things like carb cycling, intermittent fasting, right? There's a lot ketogenic dieting. There's a lot of deeply disciplined practices that can help you to become metabolically flexible. But I'm going to tell you my opinion about this. I feel like a lot of people use those methods prematurely, meaning they haven't learned about food, they haven't healed and fortified their bodies, and they typically are rushing to those types of strategies way too quickly, and they can't sustain them for very long. I also think using drastic measures can create a lot of disordered eating. Not necessarily, eating disorders, although it can cause that too. But disordered eating is feeling like you're bound to that way of life forever. So I think there's a time and a place for a lot of complicated strategies. I do. But I also don't think it's what most people need. But most people aren't willing to slow down and take the time to build the foundation and create fat loss in a healthy and above all sustainable way. And so they reach for these more extreme strategies, which end up creating a lot of, I think, psychological and physiological dysfunction over time. So be really honest with yourself if you are reaching for those things because you don't want to do the other work. And I know the other work doesn't sound fun and it takes more time, but do you want to keep having to lose the same fat over and over and over again because you've never really learned how to care for your body? Or do you want to take the time up front to learn how to do it so you can sustain it? So let's briefly touch also on exercise, because I mentioned this earlier, right? That exercise is one of the things that at the right time, in the right dosage, can be an awesome, good stressor. So when your body is in a position to handle more stress, more aggressive exercise absolutely has a time and a place. And when I think of more aggressive exercise, I think specifically of like interval training, right? Interval training is awesomely metabolically advantageous. And why? Because of the epoch effect, right? So when you do a steady state cardio session, so let's just say that you go out and you go for a 30-minute run, and the entire 30 minutes you're kind of running at the same pace and intensity. What's happening on that run, which we call a steady state, is that you're burning energy during the run, but you're not necessarily increasing your body's energy burning efforts after the exercise session is over. But when you do interval training, which is where you go hard for a short period of time and then you give yourself a good chunk of rest, and then you go hard again, and then you give yourself some rest. Not only are you burning some energy during the exercise session, but you continue to burn energy for the 24 to 48 hours post-exercise because you have literally gone into kind of an oxygen-deprived state on a cellular level, and your body has to repay that debt. And so to repay that debt, your body consumes more energy to recover from that debt in the time after the exercise session. So interval training helps you to burn fat. Absolutely. Hugely powerful. And the other cool thing about interval training is you don't have to exercise for so long. If you're doing interval training correctly, doing it for 20, 25 minutes tops is enough to get that metabolic advantage. And depending where you are, even less than that can go a long way. What I see a lot of women doing is abusing interval training. They're interval training every day, or they're interval training when their body is already overly stressed and forgetting that interval training is a stressor and can cause distress in a system that can't handle it. So like carbohydrates, interval training is to be respected. And if you are doing interval training, I don't care how conditioned you are, doing it every day is a crazy idea. Because the magic is happening in your recovery. And if you're never giving your body a chance to recover, you will basically be, have that gas pedal down of chronic stress. Your body will freak out, it will break down, and you will have more issues than you started with. And I can't tell you how many women I have worked with over the years who are athletes, who are very fit individuals, who don't understand why they feel like hell and that their body is having so many challenges. And when I look at what they're eating and how they're exercising, it's really clear why all that's happening. They're not giving their body adequate recovery. They're going too hard too often. They're not respecting that the body needs adequate nutrition and adequate recovery to do good things with something like interval training. So again, the dosage and the timing of nutritional stressors and exercise stressors is a really big deal. The other thing that I just want to mention on the front of exercise is when you are when you're accelerating fat loss via nutrition, so you are in a deficit calorically, you're not really in the best position to be lifting super heavy weights because your body isn't getting the glycogen that it needs, right? The carbohydrate that it needs to support that kind of demand. So when you're in a deficit, it's really important to adjust your strength training program to make sure that you're not overtaxing yourself, right? Again, you're not creating unnecessary stress. So you may want to consider doing a little bit less weight and higher reps for the short period of time that you're in something like a calorie deficit. Okay, so a couple other things I just want to mention in this episode. I'm just checking my time to make sure that this isn't ridiculously long. But the mindset of fat loss, when you're in a deficit, when you're adding in things like interval training, of course there will be discomfort. There will be constraint, right? Like you're kind of constraining the parameters of what you're allowing yourself to do. Another way of saying it is there will be discipline. And the way you think about those things is everything. Because a lot of people think that, well, discipline or constraint or discomfort is a bad thing. But I would argue that those things are all a part of any kind of thing worth achieving, be it healthy relationships, financial success. Any kind of achievement is going to require those things. So be really careful about what you make those things mean, and make sure you never take your foot off or your focus off of your mental health. Because again, in the fat loss process, I see so much opportunity for things to go horribly sideways in the mental health department. So you got to stay honest with yourself, and you've got to manage how you're thinking. So one other thing I want to say about these short-lived stressors, right? This eustress, this positive stress of nutritional shifts and maybe intensifying your exercise. More stress on the human body demands more recovery. So if you are exercising more intensely, your body is going to need more recovery. And this is just something that I just see so many women bypassing and not taking seriously. And then they wonder why they feel like they're a broken mess. Recovery is a really big deal. And the more you expect from your body, the more recovery you need to honor it with. Hydration is also a very big deal, especially in the fat loss process. Your liver has to process fat out of your system. I also mentioned in episode 220 that we release fat from our body. It gets out of our body through breath, through sweating, a tiny bit through urine. And all of those processes require hydration. And even if you find yourself in the depths of a fat loss process, so you're in a calorie deficit, you are doing more intense exercise, you're getting results, and something dramatically shifts in your life. Somebody you love passes away, you lose your job, there's some kind of crisis. It is so important for you to honor the pulling back and how healthy that is for you. Because again, it's a way of managing your total stress load. And this is why throughout this entire episode today, I keep emphasizing that the dosage and the timing of stressors like nutrition and exercise are everything. So if you suddenly start experiencing more stress in your life, do yourself the favor of backing the hell off. A couple other just kind of random things I want to throw in here at the end. Like I said earlier, a lot of women underestimate the power of progression. Do not change your life overnight. Do not add ridiculous calorie cutting measures and copious amounts of exercise in a short period of time. In other words, don't try to learn how to swim in the deep end of the pool. Get in the shallow end. Start small. Be consistent. And then if and when you plateau, you make another small adjustment and you move a little bit closer, like an inch closer to the deep end. Fat loss is truly a process of consistency and understanding what works for your body. So my good friend Lainey Gray, who is a functional diagnostic practitioner, so she does a lot of lab tests to help clients better understand where things are chemically misaligned. But she's always talking about becoming a health detective. That you have to be, if you truly are dedicated to health, you have to be willing to experiment and become a detective of your own health story. And I tell you this because so often things aren't moving the way we expect them to, and we tell ourselves a story that we're failing. That is an option, but it is not a helpful option. You're not failing, you're learning. You're learning about your unique body. You're learning about what works for you and what doesn't. So stop telling yourself that you're failing, because all that's going to lead to is you quitting. And remind yourself that, well, now that I better understand myself, I'm that much closer to figuring out what does work. A lot of people always ask me about healthy fat loss, like what should I be aiming for in terms of a goal? Because ladies, holy cow, are you sold this all the time. I see so many programs promoting like, let's focus on losing 10 pounds over the next month. Let's focus on losing 30 pounds in 30 days. Right? I'll guarantee that you're going to lose 10 pounds in 10 days. Anything that makes you that kind of promise, here's what you need to understand. You are not losing fat. You are losing water. Water, when we are inflamed, and this is why a lot of people at the very beginning of their fat loss journey, they lose weight easier. We're losing a lot of inflammation when we start treating ourselves better. And when we lose inflammation, we lose a lot of water. Heaven forbid what you're losing, and often you are, you might be losing muscle mass if the changes that you are making are too dramatic. Right? So healthy fat loss truly is anywhere between like a half a pound to maybe 2 pounds a week. And 2 pounds a week, the leaner you get, is really ambitious. The leaner you get, the harder it is to lose fat. That is just the way of it. Because ladies, your body loves fat. Fat is a beautiful thing. It's great for so many reasons. I talked about it a lot in episode 219, all the perks of fat. But it's helpful to your hormonal health. It's helpful to your brain health. It's helpful to your reproductive health. So your body loves having fat. And the leaner you get, the more resistant your body will become to shedding it because it's protecting you, because its goal is homeostasis. Your body, if it had its druthers, wants to keep things the same all the time. So please stop freaking out when you're trying to lose weight and you only see a half a pound loss on the scale. Take it. That's awesome. A half a pound of fat is no small thing. So if you need a visual for this, 5 pounds of fat mass is the size of a loaf of Wonder Bread. 5 pounds of muscle mass is the size of your fist. So if you lose a half a pound of fat, that's actually significant mass. And remember that fat loss, like pretty much every process in the human body that you're trying to improve, is not linear. So I often encourage clients, if they are using the scale, and not everybody does, but if you are using the scale, you're first and foremost acknowledging that the scale is only telling you your relationship to gravity. It is not telling you what that mass is made up of. But you also may want to consider taking an average of your week. So if you have taken your weight all week long each day and divide it by 7, is that slightly lower than the week prior? Awesome. That's a great way to mark progress. Versus what a lot of you are doing is I saw a 2-pound weight loss over by Friday. And then on Monday morning, I had regained that weight. And so then you're pissed off, you're frustrated, and you quit. But guess what? Nobody gains 2 pounds of fat over the weekend. What you gained over the weekend was inflammation. Maybe you had some wine, maybe you ate some processed food, maybe you didn't sleep well, maybe you worked out really hard. There's so many reasons why your body might be retaining excess water. So when the water mass fluctuates in your body and you're using that as a reason to not keep going, that's craziness. Don't do that to yourself. Just be honest with yourself. All right, I'm going to end it there. I know that this, like I said at the very beginning of this series, there is so much to the process of fat loss. We could talk about this every single week for the next 5 years. So this is really just a down and dirty nuts and bolts of some things I hope will help you to better understand the process, be smarter about the strategies you're using, and be a heck of a lot kinder to yourself throughout the journey. So I hope this is accomplishing that mission. You can let me know. Next week, I'm just going to answer some frequently asked questions around this topic of the basics of fat loss. So if there are some specific questions coming up for you, feel free to email me at Courtney@graceandgrit.com, or you can always ask me inside of the free Women of Grace and Grit Facebook community as well. So I will do that in the next episode. And I think I misspoke. It's not next week. I do a podcast every other week. So the next episode that drops, we'll do a Q&A session. All right, that is it. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you would leave a review on iTunes. I know I ask that a lot, and I ask it for a reason. It helps other people to find this podcast in the big sea of podcasts that are now out there. So you're doing me a huge favor by rating and reviewing the show. And I hope you stay well. I hope you are nice to yourself and gentle with yourself and committed to yourself. And that's it. I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care, my friends. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.